Richard Braden and myself are doing our presentation on Edgar Allan Poe. So, Edgar Allan Poe's biography. Edgar Allan Poe was born January 19, 1809 in Boston, Massachusetts. His parents were Elizabeth Hopkins and David Poe. His parents were traveling actors, so their jobs did not make that much income. When Poe was 27, he married Virginia Clem. She was actually his cousin, and she was only 13. Unfortunately, she died at the age of 24 from an illness. On October 7th, 1849, Poe died in Baltimore, Maryland, and he was there because he was traveling to sell a magazine, but shortly after some complications that were actually now unknown, he died in the hospital. Poe is an American writer, poet, editor, and literacy critic. Poe is best known for his poetry and short stories, some of his most popular being The Raven and Annabel Lee.
Childhood and family. Poe's father abandoned his family in 1811, leaving his wife alone with 2-year-old Edgar and his brother William and baby sister Rosalie. In the same year, on December 8th, his mother would die from tuberculosis. Coincidentally, it was later found out that his father would die from the same disease within days of his wife. After the death of both parents, Poe and his siblings would be separated, each child going to a different family. Poe would be taken in by John and Frances Allen, a couple unable to have children living in Richmond, Virginia. Poe would grow a strong bond with his foster mother, Frances. However, she sadly died on February 28, 1829. Poe's relationship with his father, John, was very distant, as they often got into disagreements. He viewed Poe as an ungrateful child.
Schooling and career. Poe went to the University of Virginia in 1826. Poe struggled with poverty throughout most of his life, as he struggled with finding good-paying jobs and because he had no financial support from his stepdad, John. So in 1827, Poe joined the army. In the army, it is said that Poe purposely broke the rules and ignored his duties so that he would be dismissed. After the army, Poe moved to New York to try and publish his poetry for a while and had no luck. Poe got a breakthrough when he won the contest in the Baltimore Saturday Visitor. Despite being successful, Poe left the paper because of its low salary. After that, he became an editor for several other pages, but none of them were high-paying jobs. This caused money problems in Poe's life. He started his own magazine called The Stylus, but this also failed since sales were low.
My poem analysis is on Alone by Edgar Allan Poe. First, before I read the poem, I just wanted to give a little bit of history behind it. So, the poem was written in 1829 when Poe was 20. This was shortly after his foster mother's death. The poem was never published in his lifetime, but instead it was published in 1875 after his death. I believe this was a really personal poem to him, and this is why he didn't publish it himself. In my opinion, I believe the overall tone of the poem is sadness. And as I read the poem, it'll be easier to tell why I actually think this. And I also believe Poe is trying to set the sad tone in his poem because during this time he wrote this, he was probably grieving the recent passing of his foster mom, who he was actually really close with. So he probably wanted readers to sense his hurt and his sadness that he felt during this time. Now I will go on by reading his poem. From childhood's hour I have not been as others were. I have not seen as others saw. I could not bring my passions from a common spring. From the same source I have not taken my sorrow. I could not awaken my heart to joy at the same tone. In all I loved alone. Then, in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life was drawn from every depth of good and ill, the mystery which binds me still. From the torrent or the fountain, from the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled in its autumn tint of gold. From the lightning in the sky as it passes me flying by, from the thunder and the storm in the clouds that took the form, when the rest of heaven was blue, of a demon in my view. After reading the poem, we can clearly see that the tone is sadness by the words in the poem, such as, all I loved alone, or the line, in the dawn of a stormy life. This sadness helps set the overall tone of the poem. Moving along to rhyming scheme. The rhyming scheme in Alone is rhyming couplets, and there are 11 of them. We can see this in been and seen, because those rhyme, bring and spring rhyme, taken and awaken rhyme, and the pattern continues throughout the poem. I believe Poe chose to do this in his poem because rhyming couplets can make poems more powerful and more memorable because it often creates a special effect for the poem. Now onto the syllables. In the poem, we can see that there is 8 syllables in most lines, but there are actually a couple lines that have 7. This creates a poetic foot of 4, and this is called tetrameter. The meter in the poem is iambic tetrameter for lines 1 to 8, then it changes to trochaic tetrameter mostly from line 9 to the end. Example of iambic tetrameter is in the first line. So from is unstressed, and then child is stressed. Hood is unstressed, and the pattern continues in a unstressed stressed pattern. An example of trochaic tetrameter is in line 9. Then is stressed, in is unstressed, my is stressed, and the pattern continues in a stressed and unstressed pattern. When Poe changes from iambic to trochaic, it causes the calm and soothing iambic to stop. So the trochaic then gives the sound of a poem like a more rocky and dramatic tone, and I believe this is significant because this could relate to Poe's childhood, going from okay to traumatizing and more traumatic. And the change from iambic to trochaic can also relate to Poe no longer trying to be like others. So we can say that like iambic is like what most people are, so it's like regular, they're common, while trochaic is like Poe, more rare and different. And this change in his poem can represent Poe accepting that he is not like the regular person, which is iambic, but instead he's trochaic, which trochaic can stand for different. Now I'll be analyzing the poem in stanzas. So these are the first 4 lines. In the first 2 lines, Poe already sets out an important theme. Poe being different from others. In line 2 and 3, it gives us the reason why he is different. So the reason being is that he sees things differently, and this difference in his views completely alters his life. So in line 3 to 4, he talks about his passions coming from a different spring from others. I believe spring can represent a sprout of motivation. So Poe did not have the same motivation as others. Things that cause passion to spring or motivate others are not the same things that cause passion to spring in Poe. So Poe feels the same passion as everyone else, but the motivation for his passions is not the same as others. Now moving on to the literary devices. The line, my passions from a common spring, which is line 4, is a metaphor because common spring can represent the motivations others commonly have that Poe doesn't because he's different. And this is a metaphor because it compares Poe's passions being from a different spring and spring meaning motivation. We can also see parallelism in this. There are 2 sets. The first one being I have not been and I have not seen. The second one being as others were and as others saw. This is parallelism because it gives the phrases the same grammatical structure, and by using parallelism, Poe makes the Poe balanced and clear. We can also see enjambement in here. In lines 2 to 3, there are 2 enjambements by the stop from the semicolons. Even though it's a short stop, it still creates room for readers to really think about what is being written and show emphasis for the words being read. Adding this enjambement here helps readers think more about his reasoning on why Poe feels different. This next slide analyzes stanza 2, line 5 to 8. In line 5 to 6, Poe mentions the source of his sorrow also being different. So he expresses that he experiences sorrow like anyone else, but what drives his sorrow comes from a different source. So, like, this means that he believes his sadness comes from something else others don't have. I believe this is probably why Poe feels lonely, since he can't really relate to anybody. This loneliness and isolation is also found throughout the poem. We can also see this in line 7. I could not awaken my heart to joy at the same tone, can relate to Poe also not hearing the same as others. So another example of a sense that is different. Not only does he see different from others, like he also hears different from others. So what I think he means about this is that when he listens to someone or something like music, he picks up on certain words that most people don't. In line 8, I believe he is saying that he likes the things that other people never seem to really like. So Poe has very different perspectives on things, and himself liking things that others don't is another reason why he probably feels alone and isolated. It seems like Poe is living in like a parallel world because like no one really sees this but Poe himself. So now on to literary devices. The first literary device is alliteration, and we can see this in line 5, the words same source. So this is a alliteration because both words start with S. And I feel like Poe's use of this alliteration puts these words in the spotlight and enhances those words. We can also see personification. In I could not awaken my heart in line 6 to 7. This is personification because Poe gives his heart human form. A heart can't actually wake up, so this is use of personification. And this personification can help readers like vividly imagine his heart. And for this reasoning, this line can also be considered imagery because the word awaken helps readers imagine his heart not actually being able to wake up to hear things the way others do. And the last literary device is parallelism. In line 8, all I loved alone is parallelism since I loved and I loved follow the same grammatical pattern. And this parallelism makes this line clear and easy for readers to understand. Next, in this stanza, I'll be analyzing stanza 3, lines 9 to 12. In lines 9 to 12, Poe brings up this mystery that really engulfs him like a storm cloud. Like, all his life's goods and evils, like, have been, like, encased in this code he can't really crack on his own, and neither, like, anyone else can. And the mystery he asks himself is why he perceives the world so differently than others. And in the rest of the poem, this mystery isn't actually answered, but I'll just give you my thoughts on what I believe this mystery is at the end of my presentation. So the literary devices I found was a metaphor in line 10. So I believe stormy life can relate to Poe's bad and tragic childhood, and this metaphor can help readers understand that his childhood wasn't just like sunshine and rainbows. Instead, it was like really stormy and dark for him. I also found a hyperbole in the stanza, and it was in line 12. This line has a hyperbole because the mystery doesn't actually bind or tie him up. Instead, this is just like an exaggeration to show a deep feeling of him feeling overwhelmed by this mystery. In this last stanza, I put two stanzas together because I feel like these two stanzas work better together. So from lines 13 to 21, Poe presents a lot of imagery, like he writes about all these beautiful things in nature, and while aware of all these beautiful images given, I feel like he focuses on something no one else does, and I feel like this could be the demon mentioned in line 22, of a demon in my view. I believe he can't enjoy these wonderful things in life because of his different views from other people. Also, in line 21, Poe notes a beautiful blue sky, but line 20 talks about a cloud. I believe he is trying to say that the form of a cloud was a demon to him, while others would just see normal clouds. I believe this demon is a metaphor for the negative mind he has, while others see the positive side of things, he sees the negatives. Other literary devices used by Poe is imagery, and I already talked about this a little bit, and we can see this everywhere in the stanza where he talks about nature. This imagery helps us readers really picture what Poe is imagining, and Poe's imagery can help readers feel like they're actually there in the setting that he's describing. Personification is also found in lines 17 to 18. Personification is found because lightning can't actually pass somebody flying by, so this is personification because lightning took the human form. I also found parallelism, and this was found a lot in this stanza too. So I found it in 13 to 15, 17, and line 19, and this is with the words from the in the beginning of each of those lines. So this creates a repetition that makes the phrases more like catchy and compelling for the reader. Okay, so after analyzing the poem, I believe the theme is being different from others can cause loneliness. Because Poe is different from others in many ways, he can't relate to others in life, and this makes him feel isolated from others and even the world itself. Even though being different or unique can be a good thing, it can also have its negatives, and we can clearly see this in Poe's differences. Like, Poe's differences has a negative impact in how he sees and portrays his life. Okay, so now on to the meaning. I believe the meaning of the poem is Poe's childhood trauma affecting his life. Because he went through things in childhood many children don't go through, I believe this is the reason why Poe has different views on life than others. This affects him in every aspect of life, such as the things he sees, hears, and especially things in nature that he sees differently. In Poe's childhood, his real mom dies when he was 3. His father left his family when he was also super young. His stepmom, which was the only really good and available parent to him, recently passed away, and he was only left with his stepdad, who wouldn't help him financially or emotionally. Poe also grew up in poverty and stayed in poverty. I believe all this family trauma when he was a child really took a toll on who Poe became as a person. With this negative start in his life, I believe this caused Poe to have a really negative mind for the rest of his life, and this negative thinking is Poe's demon that he mentioned in the poem. I think the mystery question Poe did not know how to answer, and it was why he perceives the world so differently, can actually be answered now. It is because of his tragic upbringing that caused him to think differently. And this created a sense of loneliness and isolation because he couldn't relate to others with this trauma. That being said, the message of the poem is childhood trauma can make someone think and perceive things differently. It won't just affect someone's childhood, but it can also change someone as a person. This can make someone feel isolated and alone since the average person doesn't go through these tragic experiences. Childhood trauma can make or break a person, and in Poe's case, it broke him.